So yeah, we're gonna be building the motor. Let's just before I just waste too much time talking about all kinds of stuff, how about we just get right on into it. There, we got everything sitting back here ready to go. We are ready to start putting in bearings. Let's go over here in the freezer. We have bearings. So yeah, our bearings are getting cold, and pretty soon I'm going to put my cases in the oven, and then we're going to be putting these babies together. So yeah, there's that. So yeah, here we are back here at the old oven, and we're going to set that baby at 300 degrees and put the cases in there for about a half hour. And that combination with the bearings in the freezer, they should drop right in like butter. Oh yeah. Yeah, so if you're new here, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you hit that bell notification. So you can keep up to date with this build. Started on the motor finally. Got all the pieces. Yeah, so we're gonna be dropping this motor in here shortly, and we're gonna be getting to the build. Once again, we got the bearings in the freezer, and we are just waiting a little while for them to cool off, and then we're gonna pop the cases in the oven. We're gonna do crankcase bearings. Okay, I got our case out of the oven, and I'm going to grab the main bearing. Oh, God. Oh, you bitch. No, come on, man. Okay. You went in there, all right. Now, let's go for crankshaft number 9. Crankshaft number 9. Boom. Make sure it goes in there, yes sir. Okay. Now we gotta hopefully hope to God that those two go in there. Okay, transmission number 40. Transmission number 40. Yes. Okay. Now, side down. Make sure the seal side down on this one. Boom. All right, let's take this sucker on inside and get her cooled down. All right, let's take the sucker back out in the garage again. All right, now we can spray this thing down with some of the MPPL, multi-purpose penetrating lube, to get rid of that moisture, because since they were in the freezer, we don't want it to rust out. Now we want to work it, work it, work it, work it. Just drive them around a little bit. Now we can get this thing in to cool down. And there's what it looks like when you got the case bearings on the left side, the left case. Let's install the right side bearings. All right, the main crank bearing. Perfect. We'll just give it a little tap. Make sure it's seated. Perfect. Now let's move on to the counterbalancer. Yes. Ooh, there it went. Let's give it a little whack just to make sure that it's seated. Not with that one. That one looks about right. Looks good. Now let's go for the transmission main shaft. All right, you went in smooth. Now let's give it a little, make sure that it's seated proper. Now we got the last bearing, the counter shaft, transmission counter shaft, but it gets a seal first. You have to line up this notch right here with the oil flow hole. Oil flow hole. I think that looks like it's seated all the way in there now. Oh. No. No. How did that happen? You gotta be kidding me, dude. You have got to be kidding me. Okay. Perfect. Make sure it's seated. Looks beautiful. Now let's see if we can get that last one in there without fucking anything up. Alright, last one. Make sure we got it seated in there. Looks good. All the bearings in the case. Note to self, don't flip the case over once you got the bearings in there. Don't flip the case so you can check on it. If you do, be very careful because they fall out as we have seen. Now let's let this baby cool off and then we'll spray it down. Alright, there's what our case should look like with the bearings inside of there now, and we're setting it up here to let it cool off for just a split second inside. It won't cool off in my garage because it's 100 degrees in there still. And then we'll spray this down with some MPPL to make sure that we keep it from rusting since it was in the freezer. Alright, so now that the right case is cooled down, nice and cool now, it's been sitting inside for a bit, we can get our retainer plate onto the transmission shaft bearing where it belongs, right there. You've actually been hearing me say, of course, we're going to blue Loctite it, but we're not going to. We're going to red Loctite this sucker. And these guys get torqued down to 8.8 foot-pounds, 106 inch-pounds, or 12 Newton meters. But I do not have a torque wrench that goes that small or that low. So I'm going to have to guesstimate this, and I'm glad I got the red Loctite on there. But I say right about, right there should cover it. Alright, now we can move on. So what we need to do first in order to install the crank, we're going to put the crank and the counterbalancer into the left case first. And in order to do that, we're going to have to line up the timing marks onto each of them when we put them in the case. So this one, the counterbalancer, has 2 marks right here that you can see with these 2 little slashes. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these 2 teeth and we're going to mark them in the back with a Sylvie Sharpie. So these are our timing marks right there that we need to line up with when we put the counterbalancer and the crank shaft in together. So the crank has a mark on it as well, which is right about here. If you can see it, there's a little dot on this crank. So the dot is right there. So that would be this one right here. So you can see we put a little mark on the back of this right here, on the back of that one. So we'll be able to see that when we put it in the case. Okay, so here we are, moment of truth. We're going to put this crank through with the counterbalancer. So I got it set up so that the crank can drop through this hole right here, hopefully. And I got it set up like this so you can see it's up a little bit on the table. Got a really firm surface to work with right here. And we're gonna hope to God that this works the easy way, right? Over here, we have our Tusk crank puller on hand, ready just in case. But I'm hoping we don't need to use it. And the cases came out of the oven. So now that we've put the bearings in there, the heat has now dispersed from here into the bearing, and that's what we want. We want to heat the bearing up, and the crank is in the freezer. So, without further ado, let's do this. Keep up with the build. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you hit that bell notification down there and turn that thing on so that you get notified whenever I put out new videos. You'll want to keep up with that because they're going to be coming here shortly. You saw before, we marked the counterbalancer right here. We marked the counterbalancer with the two teeth that are going to line up with the crank. So we can just drop this in place. It just fits right in there. And we're going to line the crank up with the 2 teeth, which is this line right here. Like so. So we're gonna set this right here, and then we're gonna drop the crank in there and line it up with I marked the back of the crank also. So let's see if we can't get down to this. So here we are with the crank. You can see it's frozen, and there's a mark on the back of it too, which is right about here. I don't know if you can see it or not, but you can just barely see it. It's right about here. So let's hurry up and drop this sucker in there. And of course, I didn't think it was going to be that simple. And of course, we want to make sure that this stays over here. So we didn't get away with it. It didn't come through like butter, like I was hoping it would. But anyway, that's okay. So what I've done is I got a couple of the head studs and I put them in here. And then I attached a rubber band to the crankshaft to make sure that it stays centered. Because while we're doing this, it's going to spin. We're going to also have to figure out how to get this to line up with this. Without further ado, let's just take our Tusk And you put this is going to feed into that couple. So you put this through here and into the end. And you want to use as much threads as possible. So there we go. Now we want to attach this guy. Okay. And then next, we can shove this guy through. It's got a little notch right here. And that little notch is going to go over this little notch here. And through the back hole. There we go. And now you want to spin this guy on. And now we should be able to crank that crank the crank through. But you want to make sure you get this guy lined up too, this counterbalancer lined up before you start pulling the crank through. So you want to make sure this is lined up. What we've done is there's a mark right there. Now we've got the teeth lined up, and it should pull in just like that. But I don't know how I'm going to do that. All right, so it's coming. It's cranking on through. What I've done is I moved the counterbalancer out of the way with a piece of cardboard right there, and then once it gets down there, we'll line up the timing marks and then pull this sucker right on through, and that'll be that. We're getting close. Okay, you come out of there for a second. There we go. We got our timing marks lined up, and the counterbalancer is in its shaft, in its bearing, and the crank should now pull in. We'll have to just watch to make sure we don't rotate it too much and get that thing bound up. But it should pull right in now, and we'll just have to see if I can't finagle that in there. Okay. Okay, well, the counterbalancer's all the way in there, and the teeth are lined up. All right, dudes. I think we got that crank in there. Counterbalancer lined up. And I think it bottomed out, but I'm going to give it one more little turn to see. That's it. She's at the bottom. And this is still a little bit loose too, so not loose, but still got a tiny bit of play in it. So I believe, I believe that's it. We can back this son of a bitch off and call it a day. Now, a moment of truth. All right, so now we got that crank in there. The counterbalancer, since the crank was in the freezer, I'm gonna go ahead and spray it down just a little bit with this MPPL, multi-purpose penetrating lube. Inhibits rust, displaces moisture, because you can tell when I took it out of the freezer there was a lot of condensation on it, so we just need to get rid of some of that. And then I'm just gonna wipe a little bit of that extra off. And there we are, peoples. Woo! It rolls and runs and it's beautiful.